Hi, and welcome to Early Retirement Roadmap, the show where I help you prepare for and thrive in early retirement. Now, I didn't fully understand how much work was taking from my life until I stopped working. It wasn't just taking 40 hours a week, and if I'm honest, usually more than that. It was taking the alarm clock, part of my evenings, the beginning of my weekends, and the mental space I was still giving it long after the workday ended. Most of all, it was taking the best of my energy and leaving whatever remained for the rest of my life. After I retired at 55, I realized something I couldn't see while I was still in it. Work has become exhausting because it's quietly expanded into almost every corner of our lives, and we've been taught to call that normal. So, in this episode, I'm going to share 6 signs that work may be taking more from you than you realize. And the sixth one may be the most dangerous because it sounds completely responsible. Then I'll give you the 5 part off ramp I would build if I were still working today. I'm not telling you to quit tomorrow. That's not freedom. That's a financial emergency. But there is a big difference between working because it supports the life you're building and working indefinitely because you've never seriously considered another way. Okay, sign number one, your free time is mostly recovery time. On paper, most full time workers have evenings and weekends free, but how much of that time is actually usable? By the time you've handled dinner, laundry, errands, and bills, there's not much energy left for anything you actually want to do. Saturday becomes a catch up day, and by Sunday afternoon, part of your mind has already returned to work. What am I walking in tomorrow? What emails are waiting? What deadline is coming? What problem did I leave unfinished on Friday? Technically, you weren't working all weekend, but did the weekend truly belong to you? Or was much of it unpaid recovery time required by your job? I didn't fully recognize this until I retired. Now I garden when the weather's right, not when I can squeeze it in. I exercise during the middle of the day. I practice piano without it competing against 10 other obligations. I can run errands when the stores are quiet, cook without rushing, or spend time with my family without trying to force my life into 2 exhausted days at the end of the week. I'm still active. I keep myself busy. Retirement has not meant sitting around doing nothing. The difference is that my week no longer feels like something I constantly need to recover from. Sign number two, work stays on your mind after you stop being paid for it. You can leave the office for the day or close your laptop if you're working remotely, but the job may continue running in the background. You replay a difficult conversation, you worry about a project that is behind schedule, you rehearse what you need to say in tomorrow's meeting, you suddenly remember the email you forgot to send. Or you carry the frustration of the workday into the rest of your evening. Work may end at 5 o'clock, but continues until bedtime in your head. And for me, a lot of times it led to insomnia. And because there is no timesheet for mental space, we don't count it. But it still takes something from us. It can make us distracted around the people we care about. It can keep us from enjoying something that should be relaxing. We may be physically at home while part of us is still sitting at work. One of the quietest freedoms I experienced after retiring wasn't simply having fewer meetings. It was no longer having a work problem constantly running in the background of my mind. Now, retirement doesn't eliminate every concern. You still have finances, family, health, home repairs, and all the complications of ordinary life. But the persistent work-related noise is gone. And until it stops, you may not realize how loud it actually had become. Sign number three, being busy has become proof that you matter. For most of our adult lives, we receive the message that busyness equals importance. If your calendar is full, you must be needed. If people are constantly asking something from you, you must be valuable. If you're exhausted, well, you must be working really hard. When someone asks how you're doing, busy has almost become the expected answer. But being constantly occupied is not the same as living meaningfully. And exhaustion is not proof that our time is being used well. This becomes especially important as people approach retirement. After decades of receiving validation from a title, paycheck, schedule, clients, customers, employees, or coworkers, they begin to wonder, who am I if nobody needs me at 8 o'clock Monday morning? What am I contributing if I'm not earning money? Am I still productive if I spend an hour gardening, exercise, practicing an instrument, or having lunch with someone I care about? One of the adjustments I've had to make in retirement is learning that my life still has value when no one else is measuring it. I create my YouTube videos and podcasts because I enjoy the process and hope they help people. I garden because it brings me joy. I practice piano because I love music. I exercise because I want to protect my health. I travel because I want to experience more of the world while I still can. Not every worthwhile activity has to produce a paycheck, promotion, or impressive answer to the question, what do you do? Your value is not determined by how tired you are, and your life does not become less meaningful because you are no longer overbooked. Sign number four, your body and your mood are already keeping score. I'm not suggesting that every stressful day means you should retire, and I'm certainly not giving medical advice, but I do think we often dismiss warning signs because they have become so common. You don't sleep well, you feel irritable, you dread Sunday evenings because your mind is on Monday morning, you repeatedly postpone exercise, you stress eat. You need the first several days of a vacation just to begin feeling like yourself again. Every new obligation feels overwhelming because there is no capacity left. And instead of treating these things as information, we tell ourselves, I just need to be tougher. I just need to manage my time better. Everyone feels this way. This is normal for my career. I can push through a few more years. Well, maybe you can. Sometimes you have to. But your body may be recording a cost that does not appear anywhere in your retirement spreadsheet. We spend a tremendous amount of time asking whether our money will last, and that's obviously important. But we should also ask whether our health and energy will last long enough to enjoy the life we're saving for. We have financial capital, but we also have time and health capital. You may have more money at 68 than you had at 58, but you cannot assume you will have the same energy, mobility, or desire to use it. That is why I don't believe working longer should automatically be treated as the risk free choice. It may reduce one kind of financial risk while increasing other risks that are much harder to measure and can't be replaced. Sign number five, your world has slowly become smaller. This usually doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually. You wake up, you get ready, you work, you handle your responsibilities, you recover, you sleep, then you repeat it. And then interests become things you used to do. Friends become people you keep meaning to contact. Trips become browser tabs you save for later. Ideas you once had for your life get pushed farther out in time. Your job does not have to be terrible for this to happen. You may even enjoy it. But when work receives most of your best waking hours for decades, it naturally becomes the center of your world. Everything else has to compete for whatever remains. One of the things I've enjoyed most about retirement is that my world feels larger again. Not because every day is a dramatic adventure, most days are pretty ordinary, but ordinary life feels different when it belongs to you. I can pay attention to the weather because it affects what I might do that day. I notice what is happening in the garden. I can take a longer bike ride, and in the middle of the day, I can plan a vacation without first calculating how many work days it will consume and asking for permission. I can go to the grocery store in the middle of the week. I can spend time developing an interest simply because I want to. Retirement doesn't make every day exciting. It made me feel like it belonged to me again. And for me, that has been very valuable. Sign number six, you keep moving your real life into later. After this project, after the kids are older, after the mortgage is paid, after the market improves, after I reach the next savings milestone, after I earn one more bonus, after one more year, there's almost always a reasonable argument for waiting. And sometimes waiting really is the right choice. But later can quietly become a way of life. The finish line for retirement keeps moving. The amount that once seemed sufficient to retire no longer feels sufficient. And the final working year somehow reproduces itself into another year. The danger isn't only that later may never arrive, it's that the version of you who finally arrives there may have less health, less energy, or less interest in doing what your younger self kept postponing. This is not an argument for recklessness. I retired at 55 because I had prepared for it. I spent years saving, investing, tracking our expenses, considering health insurance, and thinking through what could go wrong. But I eventually had to accept that no amount of preparation would make the future completely predictable. At some point, I had to decide whether my money existed to support my life or whether my life existed to keep accumulating money. So, what do you do if work is taking too much, but you cannot simply leave tomorrow? Well, you start building an off ramp. Here are the 5 parts I would focus on. First, define what enough actually means for you. Not somebody else's number, not a round number from a headline, not whatever someone on YouTube or a podcast says everyone needs, like we all need 2 million or 3 million. Your definition of enough has to reflect your spending, resources, healthcare needs, family situation, flexibility, and the life you actually want. And here's the difficult part: enough may never feel completely comfortable. I thought that if I saved enough, the decision would eventually become obvious and the fear would disappear. Well, that didn't happen. What I learned is that enough can be financially supported long before it feels emotionally comfortable. You run the numbers, you understand the risks, you build flexibility into the plan, then at some point, you make a judgment. Your accounts are probably never going to tap you on the shoulder and announce that it's officially safe to live. Second, reduce the amount of life your paycheck has to support. Every permanent lifestyle increase makes work more difficult to leave. A larger house, more expensive vehicle, recurring payments, debt, and constant upgrades may all be affordable while the paycheck is arriving, but they also increase the amount of your future time that must be exchanged for money. That doesn't mean living miserably or refusing to enjoy what you earn. It means recognizing that every fixed expense has two prices: the dollar price and the amount of your life required to keep paying it. Sometimes the most effective retirement strategy is not earning dramatically more, it is needing slightly less. Third, build a bridge instead of focusing only on retirement accounts you may not use for years. If you want to retire before the traditional retirement ages, having enough money is only part of the problem. You also have to know how you will access it, what accounts to hold, and when to withdraw from them to potentially get subsidies if you're on ACA health insurance. Best manage taxes and ride out a market downturn and recovery without having to sell stocks in your investments at the worst possible time. For example, I maintain a substantial cash runway because it gives me choices. It should eliminate the need to sell investments during a bear market and recovery. I can use it as part of my strategy also to help control reported income for subsidies for ACA health insurance. And it keeps every short term movement in the stock market from keeping me up at night. I've got a lot of podcast episodes on these topics, so be sure to check out my podcasts and all the content I have in it. Believe it or not, this is my 91st episode since I started my podcast last year. 4, start building a non work life now. Don't wait until your first Monday of retirement to discover what you enjoy. Develop interests now, protect relationships now, take care of your health now. Create routines that do not depend on an employer. Retirement removes work from the center of your week. It does not automatically replace it with something meaningful. I already had interests that could expand once I retired. My gardening grew. I began practicing piano more consistently. I had more room for cycling, strength training, travel, my YouTube channel, this podcast, and family time. Now, you do not need to schedule every hour of retirement. Of course not. But you do need enough curiosity, connection, and purpose that freedom feels inviting rather than empty. And fifth, give one more year a specific job and an expiration date. There can be good reasons to work another year: hitting a cash target, clearing debt, a benefit vesting, arranging health coverage. But be specific. What exactly will that additional year accomplish? How will you know when it has been accomplished? And what will prevent the same argument from appearing again 12 months later? One more year is useful when it solves a clearly defined problem. It becomes dangerous when it is simply the automatic response to uncertainty, because uncertainty is not going to go away. There will always be another market concern, another expense, another frightening headline, and another reason that continuing to work feels safer. You may not be able to leave work tomorrow, most people can't, but you can't stop treating endless work as the unquestioned default. You can begin protecting your health. You can reclaim parts of your week. You can build interests and relationships outside your job. You can calculate what enough actually means, and you can create a real path toward freedom instead of waiting for the decision to make itself. Work can be useful and meaningful, but it should not consume so much of our lives that almost nothing meaningful is left when the workday and week ends. I don't believe your life should be whatever remains after work is finished. And after retiring at 55, I can tell you that what rushed in when work finally loosened its grip on my life was not boredom, it was relief, energy, curiosity. And it was the realization that there were many other ways I wanted to use my days. So let me ask you, is work taking more from your life than you realized? Or if you've already retired, what did you only recognize after you stepped away? I'd also like to invite you to consider joining my Patreon. You can join for free, and I have a lot of free tools for you to use. Things like my ACA Magi Estimator, Retirement Readiness Scorecard, Cash Runway Worksheet, 10 Ways to Lower Your ACA Premiums ebook, and more. And if you'd like to go a step further, consider joining as a Roadmap member. It's just $5 a month and gets you early access to new podcast episodes, all of my podcast episodes ad-free, and access to the private Roadmap member community discussion space where paid members can ask questions, share experiences, compare notes, and communicate with others, including me, who are thinking seriously about retirement or living it, and learning from those of us that have retired. You can join my Patreon for free or become a Roadmap member by using the link in the description or show notes. And go to mikeupland.com for all of my media. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care and make the most of today.